The thing about the retreat, and the thing about retreats that I want to talk a little bit about, is that a retreat can be a very powerful springboard to awakening. Because especially if you do the retreat 100%, meaning that you don't do your regular life for 3.5 days, that you don't use the phone for 3.5 days, that you don't watch TV for 3.5 days, that you follow the schedule of the retreat, the way it was set down. That's the most powerful way to do the retreat, right? Because then you're taking yourself out of your life. You're taking yourself out of your ordinary life, and you're predisposing yourself to nothing but for 3.5 days but self-inquiry, but practicing meditation, but learning from the teaching, but expanding your understanding, developing more clarity and insight by listening to people talk about these things in many different ways. So that's the ultimate value of the retreat, is to do it that way. But, as he says, if it doesn't work for you to do that, for whatever reason, maybe you just can't deal with that, or you have other obligations that you have to deal with, then, do as much as you can of the retreat. You'll still get value from it. You'll still get a sense of the possibility that retreats have to offer. So I really encourage you to do this one, because I think he's a very straight talker, and I think he can get through where a lot of other teachers may not be able to get through, especially ones who are really involved in the traditions. The traditional stuff is not part of this conversation for the most part. I mean, I can tell that he knows the players. He drops, every once in a while, he'll mention names and different things. He's mentioned some people that I had learned from and was involved with, but I never heard any other teacher talk about them. So he's really been around and studied under Zen, studied under different teachers over the years. So I think this is a very valuable opportunity for you to really take it on. Now, I was listening to a conversation today in which the discussion focused on, is it the case that there are techniques that if you use these techniques, the techniques will produce an awakening, the techniques will produce an enlightenment experience. And the interesting thing was that in this conversation, one of the people in the conversation was Angelo, and another one was this Dr. Z, I think his name is. He's got a podcast. Yeah. So they were having a conversation. And what Angelo said was interesting. He said that as far as he can tell, while the techniques have value and they can help the process, for example, meditation, one of the most important aspects of practicing meditation is to use it as a practice to calm the mind. To use it as a practice to, if nothing else, to simply practice using the technique of following the breath, right? So that the mind can calm down, and the noise in the mind can calm down, and the static in the mind can calm down. And as that calms down, the space that it leaves, the space that it leaves becomes available to you to see things clearly, instead of it having the static and the noise. So that's one very important aspect of meditation. And then the other one is that you can use meditation as a process to explore consciousness, to look. When you're sitting in meditation, to use awareness to look. To use awareness to look at itself, right? And to use awareness to discover its own nature. And I say to discover itself and look at itself because this is a non-dual teaching, right? And so what that means is that this is all about coming out of the misunderstanding and coming out of the illusion that there is a separate self, that you are a separate self. coming out of the illusion. It's an illusion that that's the case. It is not actually true that that's the case. So in order to come out of the illusion, when you practice meditation, the practice itself is the opportunity to experience the truth. Meaning that when you move attention from the activity of thinking to the awareness of the body breathing, while you are being that awareness of the body breathing, you're experiencing the truth of yourself. When you're being that awareness of the body breathing, you're experiencing the truth of yourself, because without thinking, right, the separate self or the personality can't exist. It's literally generated in thought, right? So when you're not in the thinking activity and you're having an experience of being the awareness aware of the breath, you're experiencing reality. You're experiencing the truth. You're experiencing the way it is, which is that you are that awareness, not the character that the thinking activity produces, and you're aware of the body breathing. You are not the body. That's the truth. So you're experiencing the truth when you're having that experience. So for that reason, meditation is understood to be very valuable, and it is very valuable. But what he said was that as far as he could tell, based on his own experience, that no technique, including meditation, is really the necessary element. In other words, you could do the technique, you could do all the techniques, right? There are a lot of people, for example, that go live in a monastery and practice meditation far more than you will ever practice meditation, and stay in that situation, stay in that living situation for decades at a time, and don't have an awakening. So if meditation was the source, if meditation was the thing that would cause that to happen, how could that be so? Right? You would think that, and I'm sure a lot of people do believe that, if you meditate and you meditate more and you meditate better, that's the path to enlightenment. That's the path to awakening. But if that was the case, then these people that spend their whole life meditating would have been guaranteed an awakening, right? But that doesn't happen. Okay. So it can't be just that meditation is the necessary component. But what he said is, but there is a necessary component. And when he said this, it occurred to me that was true for me in my own experience. And I've mentioned it here on a number of different occasions, but I didn't realize that it was really the most essential thing, more than anything else. Right? And what it is the recognition. The way I see it is there's two parts. The first part is the recognition that life as you know it has failed. The recognition that who you know yourself to be doesn't work. The recognition that no matter how many times you have successes, no matter how many times you have wins, no matter how many times you get what you want that you thought would make you happy, it has proven itself not to work again and again. And you have to ignore that to keep playing that game. You have to ignore it to keep playing that game. And you have to tell yourself stories like, oh, but if I keep trying, oh, but if I make $1 million, oh, but if I get the latest new car, oh, but if I fall in love with this woman and get to marry her. So, as long as there's another game on the table, right, people keep thinking, well, I just haven't played long enough yet, or I just haven't played the right game yet, right? Just like a casino, right? And every once in a while you'll win, which will convince you that winning is possible, right? But in this game of life, just like a casino, you never win. Even if you think you win, even if even if you're a person who can go to the casino and you have enough money that you can play big time and walk away with winnings, there are people like that, right? They're the biggest losers. They're the biggest losers because they think they won something that's going to make a difference. And when it hits them that it didn't, it hurts more than anybody else because of all they put into it and how much they believed in it, right? So, but what it is then is you have to have this experience, you have to have this recognition. That's why when people come to the class to learn about meditation, the first thing I want to talk to them about is why would you meditate, right? The first thing I'm going to talk to them about is, let's take a look at life. Let's take a look at the way life goes for people, and let's take a look at the way life goes for you. And let's see, is that working? Has that worked? Can it work? Will it work? Or are you suffering? And has that suffering continued? And will it continue? And is there nothing but instability? And is there nothing but impermanence? And is there nothing but worry? Is there nothing but fear, right? Is there nothing but struggle, right? Is there nothing but conflict, right? And if you take a step back and you take a look at your life, it's hard to ignore that this is the case. It's hard to ignore that this is the case. Now, that's not to say that there are a lot of people that, would insist that this is a lot of bullshit and that the world as we know it is real and that's the game to play. And if you don't play that game, you're just stupid. And if you don't play that game, you're just a sucker. And if you don't play that game, you just fall for these woo-woo things that come up. But they're not realistic, right? So what does it take? First thing it takes is you have to come to this recognition. If there's a way out of this, I want to find out what it is. What do I mean by that? If there's a way out of this situation I find myself in which my days are numbered, right? If there's a way out of the situation I find myself in which my days are numbered, in which I don't know what's going to happen, and one thing that's definitely going to happen is the end of this physical body, and I don't know when that's going to happen. And in the meantime, I'm up against 8 billion other people who are all out to get the limited amount of money and food and water on the planet. And that's the game, okay? And how I feel about myself is a function of whether I'm a winner in that game. And if I'm not a winner in that game, and there's nothing I can do about that because my skin's the wrong color or I was born on the wrong side of the tracks or whatever the story may be, right? Then I might better look at alternative lifestyles like becoming a successful criminal and learning how to use drugs to feel good, right? And that's what we have. That's what we see. But if you get to this point where you recognize that life as it's being lived by most people is a failed reality, then you're ripe for the next step, which is, okay, let me consider what's possible. Let me look to see, is there a possibility? Is there a way out? And if I look to see if there is a possibility and a way out, and I'm fortunate enough to come into hearing about these teachings and hearing about meditation and hearing about the quote-unquote truth, if I'm fortunate enough to come across that, right? And I look into it, and when I look into it, it's telling me that if I seriously consider what it's asking me to take a look at, which is the idea that being a separate self is an illusion, which is the idea that the personality is something that happened to you, it's not what you are, right? If I see those things and I hear those things and it's making sense to me, right? Then the question becomes, there's a critical point there where the question becomes, are you hearing this as a personality that is completely conditioned to be that? Are you hearing this as a personality that's been completely conditioned to be that, and so this occurs to you as like an interesting academic subject? Oh, I'm learning about meditation. I'm learning how to meditate. I'm learning about the traditions from the East. It's very interesting. It's very interesting. I imagine it could really help people to feel better. This is the approach from the personality, right? Personality sees this as interesting, but it's academic. Personality sees this as something, well, it's kind of, I don't know. I know I'm not there. I know that they're not talking about me, That's not true about me. So I like what I hear, but if I was to have that, I'd have to somehow get from here to there, and that seems like an awful big change. That seems like an impossible thing to happen, so I'll just be a good student and learn about this stuff and, like that. Maybe it'll make my migraines go away, right? Like that. And what this subject is that if you get to the point where you do recognize that this is offering you a way out, and this recognition is not just airy-fairy, it's not pie in the sky. No, this is something that's a tradition that has thousands of years of history, right? that has very profound teachings and practices, and has had as its leaders people like Buddha and Jesus Christ and Tao, and Lao Tse and others, right? So this is not just some, superficial thing. This has really got guts to it, and it's really profound. Then the question becomes, if you see that this could transform your life, if you could see that this would give you transcendental wisdom, if you see that this could give you everything you've ever wanted in this life, as far as being happy, as far as being at peace, as far as feeling satisfied, as far as feeling complete, as far as feeling that you are awake and alive and that you have fulfilled the potential of a human life. If you see that possibility is real, and you see that these teachings are talking about that possibility, and you see that it's available to you, you've come into contact with it, right? Then the question becomes, do you then say, I am going to do that? See, that's the question. Do you then say, I'm going to do that? Are you then so curious about this possibility that the curiosity becomes the energy you use to start to pursue the path, to start to pursue this experience? Because what Angelo said, and when he said it, it really rang a bell for me, because it was absolutely the case. I think I mentioned it here. When I was 18, 19, 20 years old, somewhere in there, right? It was the first time that I came across Alan Watts, the first time I came across a lot of different consciousness stuff that was around in those days, along with LSD and Richard Alberts and Timothy Leary and, all the rest of it, right? But I remember when I came across this stuff, and it really hit me in terms of I had enough of an understanding of it to know that it was real, and had enough of an understanding of it to know what it could offer me, right? I distinctly remember saying, that's what I am going to focus on for the rest of my life. I remember sharing that here, and the way I said it here was a little different. I said that when I realized that I didn't want to be what I would be if all I could be was what I would become from the family I came from, right? Which was disaster, right? I thought, well, if it's possible not to become what I'd become, if the only thing I could become is what I'd become from being in that family, I want to do that. I definitely want to do that, right? So that's the way it occurred to me. But that was another way of saying the same thing, right? That I was aware of this possibility, and I was committing myself to that possibility. And not only was I committing myself to that possibility, but the way that occurred was that I recall distinctly saying to myself, I may die trying. I may not get there, and I may die trying, but that's much better than just accepting that I have to be what my developmental history or what my conditioning was going to make me into. I'd rather die trying being something other than that, right? And that's what it takes. That's what it takes. What Angelo said, and I agree, because that changed my life. That changed my life. That commitment determined what I paid attention to. That commitment determined what I read. That commitment determined how I related to the unworkability that I came in contact with in my life. I started looking at it with these understandings. How did these understandings help me to understand what's going on here, like that? And then the other thing is this curiosity, this fascination with the idea of finding out what you are. You know what I mean? The fascination with the idea, first of all, you have to come to the recognition that you don't know what you are, that what you were told that you are is not actually the case. You were told that because you were learning how to play a game, is what you were told. You were learning how to play this game called function in the human, in the human society, in the human world as a human being. There's a game going on here. Here's how you play it, right? Like that. But then you find out that wasn't actually the absolute truth, right? And so once you understand that and you realize that wasn't the absolute truth and you learn about these possibilities, then there's this fascination. Oh, if I come to the realization that I really don't know who I am, that who I thought I was isn't who I am, and I really see it, I really see that, right? Then now I'm really interested, well, what the hell am I? You know what I mean? What am I? What is this? What is this awareness that I'm experiencing? What is this? What is this world that I find myself in? How did I get here? What's this about? What's this for? What am I doing here? Like that, right? You can become fascinated with those questions, right? And become so interested in those questions and so interested in the possibility that you could actually experience the answer to those questions. And that is the factor that will determine your success more than anything else. Why? Because you have an absolute commitment. You're willing to be open and receptive. You're willing to look. You're willing to challenge the beliefs you thought were real, right? You're willing to enter into this process. You're willing to go through this process. And that, more than anything else, will determine how it goes for you. And of course, once you're doing this, then you practice meditation, you learn about the teachers and all that. But what I'm pointing to, and what he was pointing to, is the thing that actually determines whether you will actually awaken, right? Is how serious are you about this? Because if you did get it, if you do see it, if you do realize what this is, it can't be any other way than this is the most important thing in your life. Isn't that obvious? Isn't it obvious? If it is the case that there's something available to you and I that would completely transform our experience of being a human being and completely transform the experience we're having of a human life and provide for us everything that we could imagine that we could want as a human being, happiness, peace of mind, satisfaction, clarity, to be free from fear, right? If you really saw it that way, how could it be that this wouldn't be the most important thing in your life? And if it's not the most important thing in your life, then obviously the personality has still got enough a hold on you to keep you from recognizing what this really is. That's the only possible answer. It's the only possible answer. If everybody on the planet, if something could happen where everybody on the planet would see what this is, right, would really see what this is, then everybody on the planet would be doing whatever they could possibly do to experience this. They would have to be. They would have to, right? So that's the factor. You see, that's the factor that will keep you going, that will make it possible for you to experience the confusion that you have to go through, that will make it possible for you to experience the frustration that you will have to face. It'll make it possible for you to experience the desperation you feel when you're at your wit's end because you still haven't experienced this possibility, but you know it's real, like that. That's all just part of what you go through to get, to experience this possibility. But you can't make it through that unless the commitment that you have is deep enough. If it's not deep enough, when the right thing happens, you'll just get unstable and you'll start to wobble and, you'll start to have serious considerations about this. And during that time, you may switch gurus or you may go find some more different books to read or whatever, right? But it's just more of the same. It's just more of the same. So this is a very important thing to understand. And so when I say this, it's an opportunity for you to look for yourself and see, where am I at about this? Where am I? Am I just trying to be a better version of me? Is that what I'm doing here? Am I just trying to improve how I am as a person? Nothing wrong with any of that, right? That's the stuff that people go to psychotherapy for, right? But this isn't that. This is getting to the root. This is getting to the source of the problem. The problem being that you have a misunderstanding about who you are. You think things are true that aren't true. You believe things that aren't true. And you're trying to live your life inside these beliefs and inside these ideas and inside these misunderstandings. And it can't work because it's not consistent with reality. Period. It can't work because it's just not consistent with reality. So that's the message. The message is, look and see where you're at about this. See whether or not you're relating to this the way it actually is, or whether you're holding it like it's just an interesting thing to learn about. If you're holding it that way, there's nothing wrong with that, but you can pretty much give up the idea that you're going to experience the experience of awakening. That's really available to anybody. It has to be available to anybody, because what awakening means is realizing that you're already who you are. That's what awakening means. Realizing that you're already who you are. And once you realize that, right, then you go about the business, right, of doing some psychotherapeutic work. Angelo calls it, shadow work. A lot of people call it shadow work, right? Then you have to clean up your act, right? Then you have to start paying attention to your neurotic tendencies and stop behaving that way. That's the work that you have to do after you wake up and realize who you are, right? But that work begins to clean things out so that you have more and more space and more clarity and more peace. And meditation gets transformed so that you start to experience meditation as a way of getting access to this spacious experience of what you actually are. And it becomes so enjoyable. This happened to me not that long ago, that meditation becomes so enjoyable that I do my formal meditation and then I get up and I can't continue the day. I go to another room and sit down for another hour because I want to have this experience. It's just that enjoyable to have that experience. Now, that's not the way it is in the beginning of practicing meditation. In the beginning of practicing meditation, you're in the middle of the craziness when you start. You're in the middle of the craziness when you start. So naturally, when you sit still and you attempt to meditate, all you're going to experience is the craziness. And that's where a lot of people stop, right? But if you stay with it, that craziness, that noise will start to slowly calm down and get quiet. And as it's getting quiet, you start to experience this other side of it, in which what there is peace, and what there is this sense of space, this sense of timelessness, this sense of satisfaction. And you just want to be that. You just want to be in that experience. And then it becomes a matter of coming to the understanding that this experience is available all the time. So now you have to learn how to maintain the awareness of this experience while you're actively involved with people who are crazy. That's what it boils down to. And you were crazy, and you still have a tendency to fall into being crazy, right? But you now have had an experience of the truth, and you now know what it is, and you're now in the process of integrating that, right, with your personality, which has to change a lot, right? So that you can learn how to be in the world but not of the world. So that you can learn how to be around people who are crazy and still love them. Because they know not the truth. They don't know who they really are, that's all. You can actually have a sense of humor about it when you think about yourself, right? When you think about how the ways you've been crazy are in your life, right? And most of us, one place to look to see the difference that it makes, the thing I mentioned earlier, about having this interest, this fascination and this curiosity about the truth, right? And it's important to know how to know when you've had that transition, when you now recognize yourself as the awareness, right? And you're now beginning to live from there instead of living as the personality. It's important to know that has occurred, that you have had that awakening, right? But then after that, right, now you have to pay attention to start to undo the tendencies and the patterns that play out from your brain and your mind that have to do with who you thought you were, that you're not anymore. So that'll come up and play. And the other place that you can tell that you've had the awakening is in your relationships. You discover that you love your parents no matter what happened. right? And in my case, that was a big deal to discover that I love my parents, given what happened, right? But you discover that you love your parents. You discover the ability that you have to be with other people, and the ability that you have to unconditionally love people, and the ability that you have to be in the relationships that matter to you in a way that works, right? I mean, I can honestly say in my life, and I don't think I'm that different, but I think for most of us, the place that our craziness shows up the most is in our relationships, right? With our parents, with our husbands or wives, brothers, sisters, children, partners, whatever, in the relationships, right? That's where a lot of the suffering goes on and a lot of the unworkability goes on. And that's also a place that when this transition has occurred, it shows itself there very clearly. It shows itself very clearly there. For example, since this transition occurred in my life, right? And I'm not kidding when I say this, I have had no conflict with my partner. None. 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 For a lot of people, they'd say, oh, come on. You know what I mean? You got to be kidding. You got to have conflict with your partner. No, you don't have to have conflict with your partner, just like you don't have to have conflict with yourself or conflict with life. And the way not to have conflict with life, your partner, or yourself, right, is to be there, presence yourself as the truth of yourself, presence yourself as who you really are to that relationship, and that will make the difference. That will make the difference. And the thing is this, the fact that the other person and you are different, right, that's going to always be true, right? The fact that the other person and you are different is no longer an issue. They can think different than you, they can believe different things than you, they can behave different than you, and that's not an issue. And if that's not an issue, what is there to fight about? You see what I'm saying? It's that simple. It's just not an issue. Okay, we're different. All right, we're different. So that may mean in a situation where the two of us have to come up with an agreement that we're going to act as a couple, right? But we're different. So how do we deal with that? Okay, I listen to your version, you listen to my version, right? And then we have to go through a process of working out which one we're going to use. It's like Ramesh Balsekar said, his version of a workable relationship is 45-50. 45-50. And when people hear that, they say, oh, that doesn't sound right. That doesn't seem right. It should be 50-50. Oh, if it's 50-50, how do you decide anything? Right? You can't decide anything. In any given situation, somebody's got to dominate when there's two people, right? But if you understand that, it doesn't have to be a problem. You don't have to have a fight about it. You can just understand that. So you listen to each other's points, and at some point you say, okay, we'll do this. That's all. No. If that was the case, it wouldn't work, okay? But it could work, because I'm just thinking of a friend of mine when you said that. The Zen teacher up in Ithaca, we were talking about this at one point, and he said, I'll tell you how I deal with this. I wipe my hands of the whole thing. If any decisions have to be made, she makes them.
Oh, that's good. That's good.
Or it could be the other way, right? So that could work too, right? That could work too.
So you just leave your personality out of it.
Yeah, you just say whenever a decision has to be made, I am empowering you to make it. That's all. That's the end of that. So the most important thing of all of this is that it is real, it's possible, it's available, right? And don't do yourself the disservice of thinking that it's not for you, or thinking that it can't happen for you, or it won't happen for you. In fact, the thing to really do, if you want to be clear about what this possibility is to understand that it already happened for you. So this isn't about whether it'll happen for you, it's about whether you'll notice it happened for you. And if you notice it happened for you, then it happened for you. And then you can start to live the life that gives you, and start living your life from there, right? And start eliminating all of the bad habits that you've had, one major one is that you think, right? Because if you're living from this, right? If you're living from this, then you don't operate in the world like you think. No, you operate in the world like thoughts happen, and you're the awareness of the thoughts. And that's the process, right? And then from the awareness of the thoughts, and that awareness has its own natural way of discernment, right? That is accurate, right? So you have the awareness of thoughts, and when that awareness is relating to the thoughts, it has its natural sense of reality. So whatever thoughts don't fit reality, it discards. And then you start cleaning up your act until there's less and less craziness, less and less neuroticism, less and less times when you think you're the thinker. And when that's not the case, you're relaxed, you feel at home, you feel peaceful, you feel happy. What else do you want? What else do you want? Well, the second part of that is all of this that I've just got done saying, right, is the way it occurs for you, which means it occurs for you that you can do this. Otherwise, I'd be crazy right now, right? It's the way that occurs for you, right? At another level, it's all just happening. But neither one is the truth and invalidates the other. They're both true. That's the part that people, paradox starts to become something you can deal with as you continue in this process. And you realize that the idea that thy will be done and my will be done, right, are in conflict with each other doesn't necessarily have to be true at all. Because the very thing that I'm saying and the very thoughts you're having and the very feelings you're having, the very things you're doing, right, are all coming from the same source all the time. But at ground level, it looks like we're doing it, just like the rest of the illusion, like I'm here and you're there. At ground level, it looks a certain way, right? But when you get back from it and look at it, there's only one source. That becomes obvious. It becomes obvious, and it becomes obvious that simultaneously, and this is the key to understanding the relationship between no free will and thy will be done, simultaneously you're God and you're not. Simultaneously, you're God and you're not. When you're in this situation, you're not, right? Because everybody's agreeing that that's what it is, right? But when you wake up, you realize even in this situation, you're God, but you have to keep it secret. If you go around talking like that, then people are going to have to put you away, right? But you can know that's true. You can know that's true, and you can live from that truth, and that'll work. That'll work. You don't have to tell anybody. But you can become a part of a community where everybody understands this, and in that community, you can emit. You can emit to it.
Health insurance might pay.
No. But it's just like Douglas Harding said. And when you get farther enough down the road with this, you see it very clearly. The only way to know God is to be God. Simple as that. Okay.